Our thesis is that there's tech debt hiding in pretty much every corner of the enterprise, and not to ignore the processes, the tooling, the people, the knowledge, how all those things come together ultimately.
Hi, everyone. I'm meeting with Holland Barry today on the Built for Trust podcast. Holland, say hello.
Hey, everyone. Hey, Nick. Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
So excited to have you. Actually, I've been thinking about this most of the day because what we're going to talk about, could be viewed as being kind of a little dull, but you guys have really re-energized this whole thinking about tech debt. So we're going to get into that. But before we do, what we'd like to do on the podcast is introduce, thought leaders, especially that are going to be sharing kind of the keynote stage. And you will be doing that with Daniel Conroy from Raytheon. So I'm really looking forward to that. So this is almost like a little preview.
Yeah.
Actually, we're going to spend more time now than you will have on stage. So it's more than a little preview.
Yep.
But anyway, so what we'd like to do is give you some time to kind of talk about your career journey and how you landed over at DXC. And DXC is a great company. Love them. Love Chris Drumgoole, that's there. He's been a longtime board member and a supporter of the community. James Walker, as well. And there's just a ton of folks, that are over at DXC, super smart, and really plugged in. So anyway, with that said, tell us a little bit about, your career journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess we'll rewind kind of close to the beginning. I've been fascinated with computers and computer science ever since sixth grade. I got to see the insides of an IBM clone PC, and I just immediately thought I got to understand every single thing that's going on in there. So I was fortunate to have an older brother that was sort of already doing some of this work. He was interning at a local bank, and his workload was slowly shifting to me in an unpaid intern fashion, so he could go spend time doing more fun things with his friends. So quickly started to get up to speed.
Good older brother.
Yeah. But, feeding 82 floppies in to load a Novell operating system, converting, token ring networks to Ethernet, a lot of networking centric stuff, back in the early days, and really just trying to figure out how it all came together. And that kind of early unpaid work led to a local company here in Silicon Valley, kind of friend of a friend of the owner saying, hey, I've been having this problem. Do you know any of this stuff? Happened to be a Novell network problem. I'm like, I've been studying it. I'm kind of doing all this stuff. And he comes in and I was able to go in and kind of figure out a problem that a few others hadn't. And so that landed me a full-time job there as a system/network administrator. This is in the mid 90s. And gosh, the journey's been a twisty one, but a fun one ever since then. I started an IT consulting company, and a couple of years after that, I ran IT for a big international electronics firm for a while. I helped found a startup, infrastructure automation startup that ultimately got sold into Dell. I spent about a year there, decided, I was ready for another startup. I pivoted into network and in hypervisor security. So another startup that ended up being acquired into, of all things, a data center co-location company called Cyxtera. Spent 7 years there as the Field CTO. I was the CTO of that other company that I just mentioned, Capbird. And then kind of at the end of the journey with Cyxtera, I'd started to get a sense of the building team over here at DXC. I knew Chris Drumgoole from my past, a few others, and it was really the team that drew me over into this current part of my career journey. Just working with people you like and trust. So here I am, and I'm the global Field CTO here at DXC.
Awesome. How great. So I would think that maybe your brother was the most consequential, person in that career journey. He kind of really, maybe he was just trying to take a little bit of a load off his shoulders, but it seems like that was really, a pivot, a point in your career early on.
I think there were several, and it would be impossible to enumerate this tribe of mentors and influential folks that unknowingly at the time propelled me into that next stage of the journey. But yeah, dozens and dozens of people. I mean, I call it luck, right? It's luck and who you know that have gotten me here. But yeah, a lot of people to acknowledge and getting me here.
Awesome. Well, I love that, you were really kind of right there in the beginning. Like, in the 90s, we were kind of dealing with multiple protocols and multiple LAN standards. We were kind of making that transition from SNA and
Yeah.
TCP/IP. So you were like right there. It's there's getting fewer and fewer of us, who kind of live through that, and that have been in the industry, throughout, our career, kind of cut our teeth on, I think really what it is like to tinker,
Mm,
and to
yeah.
try to get this stuff working because there weren't many manuals at the time, and we were all just trying to. It was probably one big, organization operation, where we're all learning and sharing, at the same time. So. Actually, it was a
Yeah.
great time, a good time in the industry, to figure this out. And look what we did, with that. We kind of changed the world, literally,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm glad I don't have to use my 2400 baud modem to dial into a BBS to get a patch or figure something out anymore. Things have gotten a little easier in that regard.
well, that's awesome. Well, since you have that kind of longevity in the industry, and through all of these various different waves of different computing models, right? Like mainframes, mini computers, PCs, into the web. Companies have invested in all these technologies, and they served us well. They delivered productivity gains. But there's also, like, sometimes it's that the operational burden of them is questioned whether it's kind of delivering the value. And so we have kind of layers of tech debt, that have been building up within organizations for a long time, and no one really has figured out, to a large extent, how to deal with it other than just to keep it going, right? Because it's like it's something. You might have an application, it's revenue generating, and it's on like an older system,
Yeah.
and when something's working, to justify replacing it for like maybe a new platform is really hard. It becomes really expensive, right? Because you're comparing it against zero, so TechNet has been a real issue in our industry for the longest time. So, but like when I was talking with Daniel Conroy, kind of a couple months back, he was telling me he was working with DXC around a new model where you can put in some various different inputs into this model, and then you can get out, a kind of a financial model, and then how do you kind of unlock modernization of that? So why don't we talk a little bit about that? And first, because there's an AI part of this which I find
Yeah.
totally fascinating, and I think it's the newest way to think about tech debt. So why don't we start there with the
Yeah.
kind of tech debt score, and and how that can move budgets.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you were right to call out when we first started talking that this topic can be bland, and it also runs the risk of just saying, "Hey, we found like a brighter spotlight and a bigger microscope to shine on the problem that you already have." Right. So,
Right.
so what's the path forward? And really, that was the impetus. Daniel and I were at an event earlier this year, and it was really him saying, I think we have all the pieces here. We have the data, we have the formations of some early methodologies, things like ISO 5055, where we have like it's not just us saying this is how you should think about it. It's a standards body saying you should think about it. And then we have multiple forms of AI, both generative and other. We're using a form of AI, machine learning called NLP, and a tool that we're building as an example to start helping make sense of all this stuff, right? How do
Mm.
I identify? How do I prioritize? How do we think about tech debt beyond kind of the traditional code quality architectural things where we have some pretty good definition of standards today? And that was really the genesis of the idea to come up with this tech debt score, and the tech debt scoring system that's based on standards, that is broadening the scope of measurement beyond the source code, so we can get more of an enterprise-wide holistic view of where's tech debt hiding, how should I think about it in the context of my business, how should I maybe benchmark it amongst my peers in the industry, and how can I
Mm.
put together a credible remediation path that's going to hold water at the board level, because ultimately I'm justifying a request for dollars, from my financial leaderships and others saying, I want to go tackle these problems, and here's why, and here's what it is, with clearly communicated, KPIs, measurement standards, things like that. So it's a culmination of things coming together that's led us to this point. And, I do want to call out that we've been working on this, for a good part of this calendar year. It's still in like the pilot phases. We're doing some early work with customers like Daniel's, several other institutions across industries to help get these initial data sets, go through some of these survey questions that we put together to start putting that picture of the tech debt score, which again, think about it like a credit score. And that even within your credit score, there are notions of strategic debt. We all probably carry a little bit of strategic debt. Same thing holds true with technical debt, right? But there's not been a framework to say this is what good looks like. So we're trying to do that definition. And it's not just us in a vacuum. It's with the community. We're going to be reaching out to the broader ONUG community next week too, to say help invite us, because the more people that are participating, the better the scoring system is going to be. So we're going to have more of that benchmarking data.
That's great, and I totally encourage everybody and anyone who wants to get involved in this to get involved. So I think the more that the more that we can kind of share and make a model that is beneficial to the entire community in the industry, the better. So then let's kind of think about maybe some outcomes. So you have these various different signals that are going into the model, and then what's coming out is a score. And I would think that maybe you have a kind of a debt score across maybe various different applications. Is it, or it's like, how granular do you go, on the scoring?
Well, yeah. So what we've done is I would argue that we've broadened the scope of this tech debt measurement effort from one or two categories, mostly centered around source code, into what we currently have defined as 12. Don't hold us to that. It could go to 11. It could go to 13. But really thinking about your technology investments, the quality of your infrastructure, the state of your cloud, the state of your operations, security, data management, testing methodology and coverage, architectural designs, process and tooling. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there, wow. Right? Yeah. And each one of these categories has a combination of data that are in humans' minds and systems of record, right? Where facts exist, where we can start mapping these things together and pulling together a store. And so that's exactly what this whole effort's all about. We're starting relatively small. So think we've got a survey framework. We've got these categories in mind. We're actually just starting with 5 of the key categories. And that's going to be the basis for a survey framework, and then also to be able to ingest data from something like a CMDB. But eventually, it's going to be much broader, where we're going to be reaching into code repos, different asset inventory systems, incident management systems, bug tracking systems, project management systems, your CI/CD systems, ticketing systems, collaboration platforms, things like that. And those are those systems of record that we know that we can interrogate to increase the fidelity of that initial score that we're going to produce, right? So really quickly, we can get to kind of a broad sense of where you sit, and then build on that with this additional data that we can layer in over time.
That's really great. What's interesting too is, the scoring around that and being able to kind of compare scores with others, maybe in your industry, and also maybe sometimes outside of your industry, as well. So everyone wants to know kind of like really how well they're doing, so I think so all those are great. I love the categorization that you're already starting to think through. I love the idea that while you're not there now, but you're kind of going towards that, is either more automated inputs, ways in which to get out data versus surveying, so you got to start someplace. So I think that's really great. Let's talk about, how does the AI piece get into this? Because I was thinking in one of two different ways when I first heard this. The first way I thought about it is that, well, that would be really interesting, if, okay, we know we have a whole bunch of tech debt. We know that it's going to be really, that it's usually hard to kind of change it out because of what I had mentioned before. Is there a play here which is more ambitious, where kind of agentic can come in? And again, we're not here yet, but where agentic can come in and rewrite applications, rewrite kind of a system of record for a company that customizes that system of record for their business, versus going to an SAP or going to a HubSpot or Salesforce or what have you, and consuming that enterprise SaaS software, and that has maybe 5,000 features and you use 50 of them,
Mm.
So that was one of the first things that I thought about. But then after hearing you talk, the other thing I'm thinking about is the analysis of the data. Once you're able to really analyze or ingest a lot of the data, then which is what companies want to do anyway. It's interesting too. Sorry, I'm kind of going off on my own little tangent. But it's like one thing that AI will do is really look for inefficiencies around workflows.
Mm.
And if you are ingesting a lot of legacy and kind of the source code and the CMDB systems, and you're able to kind of look at those scores, you may at some point in time also be able to kind of look at, workflows and, which ones of these workflows are antiquated because you're relying upon antiquated, older technology, as well. So it can also be a modernization process. But this is me just pontificating. So really, what are you guys doing? Where's the AI angle on it? It's so I was thinking either an agentic angle. Now I'm kind of thinking kind of an analytic angle.
Yeah,
So
no, I think you're going to V3 right now. I'd say we wanted to start in a phased, pragmatic approach in terms of building this thing, and I think the biggest thing right now is the identification phase and the logic to prescription of remediation or putting a plan together, right? And so I
yeah,
think on the tail of all of that could absolutely be some sort of agentic driven remediation where we have some sort of domain specific model that understands your business, that understands your data, and can just go do the thing that it's going to be prescribing to you in these kind of like these initial reporting phases. But first we got to make sure that we've got the interrogations right, we got the model right, we've got kind of those industry optics so we can calibrate to say here's what good looks like, right? Here's what overinvesting looks like. Here's what underinvesting looks like. Here's the result of that, and then we get into that. So right now, there's two different flavors of AI in play. There's very much going to be and the LLM version of this, which is going to be able to ask natural questions, about your business, just like you can with a chat prompt, right? So I think that'll be
mm,
step one on that. The other one is the more analytics angle, the thing I mentioned earlier, which is using that NLP variant of machine learning to make sense of all of these, thousands, hundreds of thousands of data points, form relationships with them. And that part of that logic becomes the foundation of where you should focus and what you should do. So those two technologies working together in phase one. Where it goes from a remediation perspective, I think is going to depend a lot on where the industry goes too, because we may just be informing another system that already has, persona or role based agents in play that are authorized to go into those systems to do whatever work is required to remediate. That could be a version of this in the future. So I want to state that as a future, but
yeah.
definitely those two efforts will touch in some way in our minds as we evolve the initiative.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like I think the name of tech that does disservice to really kind of like what you're doing. It's what this really is a planning tool, and a modernization tool, a corporate modernization tool.
Yeah, it's well put.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was saying that it's well we I don't want to say struggled with the term tech debt, but we know that it has certain connotations, and you could even ask 10 different people and maybe get 10 different answers. So,
Yeah.
I'm sure once the marketing machine gets a hold of this, we may come up with something a little more elegant or compelling. But right now, I think there's at least some sort of notional familiarity with the concept around tech debt. We're trying to build on
Yeah.
that. And but you're absolutely
Okay.
right. This is a modernization accelerator
Yeah.
at the end of the day, and hopefully giving you optics into things that would have been really hard or impossible to know yesteryear.
Yeah. So then maybe if we kind of think, out, um, 6 months, a year or so, what do you think, or what do you hope for that would be, outcomes that where companies are using the tool and what they're able to do, what kind of remediation, what kind of benefits, what kind of outcomes, might,
Yeah.
do you aspire, to have happen, with this process?
Yeah, I think practically speaking, we want to build the foundation for those outcomes to be realized. And what that means is working with the standards bodies to start incorporating kind of the scope expansion of tech debt measurement. So that's number one. And then
Yeah.
evolving a tool for the community that everyone can use. It's our intent to have a version of this that anyone can just, whether it's a survey or whatever tools we make available to the community to say, here's the standard, and then here's some tools that you can just go in and kind of self-serve. And if you need a hand, whether it's us or one of our peers in the industry, we can help you down those remediation paths. But I think the third piece of that, and I mentioned it earlier, is the community engagement, because like I said, the more I would love to have hundreds of enterprises kind of putting data into this, help establishing those industry benchmarks. So I know that if I'm in aerospace and defense, and I've got a score of X and my closest competitor has a score of Y, we start to
Yeah.
form a version of what good for that industry looks like. And we can prioritize those remediation funding efforts based on, hey, we got to get these two things a little up, or we're slipping here. And that could represent a competitive disadvantage if we maintain that score that might be lower than the folks across the street.
Yeah. It's so funny. It's like, I'm not sure why I'm thinking of this, but it's like years ago, we had a guy named Keith Shin. Keith was a CIO. Actually, he ran it's called Click to Compute over at Fidelity. And they were trying to compare themselves to the other financials. And try to rank each other. And then what they realized is once they started going outside of the financials industry, they kind of realized that they were like the fastest fat guy running in a race. So like other industries were just doing things that were just so much more impressive than their peers, and they got a very different view, from kind of looking off. And so I can kind of see that happening here. Anyway, I digress a little bit, but that was
Yes,
a good quote
certainly
from.
a young startup that was maybe born on modern, hybrid infrastructure or whatever is going to have a very different tech score than maybe someone who's been around for 70 years. So I think
Uh,
that there's a regional element to it. There's definitely an industry element, and kind of, yeah, know your measuring stick is probably a good thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, funny. So anyway, but I share your your interest and your goal of having, it's like with all these models, the more data that you have in it, the better the model is going to be.
Yeah.
Obviously at ONIG, we're very happy to help and support and to get to make spread the word so that people understand what you're doing and how they can get involved. So is there I think, it's like, do you aspire this, so there's remediation around kind of infrastructure and, putting new infrastructure in. Do you kind of also, do you view remediation like in workflow as well, and how this might kind of morph or change
Absolutely.
into like, how do you change workflow with with a new infrastructure that goes in? So it's not only can you replace what you've done with with a new kind of tech stack, but it's more like how can you actually change the business, that it runs better and smoother and it's less moving parts.
Yeah, absolutely. And our thesis is that there's tech debt hiding in pretty much every corner of the enterprise. And, not to ignore the processes, the tooling, the people, the knowledge, how all those things come together ultimately in these processes. And so process refinement, and I hate to say remediation, we'll say refinement is a big part. Hang back this tech debt, because if you have someone doing a bunch of manual processes that's low value add work when they could be doing something obviously that's related to a strategic initiative, well, we know we want them to be spending our time. So if we can help uncover that and mark it as an initiative, all the better. So yeah, that's definitely in scope with this initiative.
Okay, awesome, great. So then maybe if we kind of think about, once you have output and a kind of scores on tech debt, like how do you envision this might be presented to a board? Because like really in the end, this is going to help with planning, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that plan is going to be a problem, solution, budget, and schedule. So, on the, on this, like, how do you envision the output of this contributing, in aiding kind of a CIO as they bring this to the board and seek to get funding?
I think it's going to be a couple of things that are going to carry more weight maybe than what's happening right now. And look, every single large enterprise and even smaller ones on the planet right now have some way that they're communicating this to the board and the financial impacts and the risks. But we're saying if there's a standards body, right, that we're mapping, data to real data that's quantifiable, we can then create a framework to communicate at the board level on why we need to take action and where we need to take action. So if I'm thinking about maybe that first meeting, right,
Yeah.
probably a level set that needs to occur about, what is tech debt? Are we all talking about the same thing here? Great. Kind of make that case of what this expansion framework, right, kind of going beyond the traditional code architecture, maybe infrastructure too, the things they're used to hearing, saying we're thinking about this more holistically. And probably a little bit of an education too about the challenges that we're addressing with this new approach, right? A lot of the stuff's hard to measure, hard to quantify. There was no standard last year. There's no ability to benchmark against peers too. So we're introducing some new concepts that may be unfamiliar, and then giving a framework to lay out, and that's what this reporting is going to do, kind of the current risks, the current scoring, and then finally, what are the recommendations, right? That AI-based recommendation engine that's ultimately going to help you prioritize, estimate those remediation efforts, burn down those tech debt ratios, all based on knowledge of their business process, their business logic, their pillar systems, their team, ultimately accelerating the time to get to work, burn down the tech debt, and free up their resources and money, time and money of other people to go do more strategic things. That's actually the ultimate goal. A lot of
Yeah.
people are spending time just on maintenance and other low value tasks, all anchored by tech debt.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. That makes so much sense, on kind of addressing the board, level with this. So it's not just dollars and cents, but it's really kind of business concerns, business outcomes, focus. So that's great. So actually, I want us to circle back a little bit, Holland. So it's really around, like, this is a kind of AI networking summit, and there's, everyone now has the mantra that they have to modernize this infrastructure, and they do
Mm-hmm.
have networks have a ton of legacy within them as well. There's lots of different, parts of the infrastructure. There's multiple vendors, and maybe they started to like invest in one versus the other. So maybe things are kind of behind. But I'm not sure if the model can help in this, or is this something that, maybe you've just seen a lot? Is that kind of like, what order should they start to like pay down kind of network infrastructure debt? So they focus on like identity or observability, automation, kind of level 2, level 3, forwarding, kind of level 7 controls,
Yeah.
is, will this also help in the overall infrastructure and how that infrastructure needs to change, and then also sequencing around what they should be getting rid of first in order to modernize?
Yeah, it will, and it's contemplated in the model. So both networking and security as categories, and every company is going to be a little bit different in terms of that list that you just mentioned. But I think all things being equal, meaning if their heat map of problems kind of is evenly spread, I would think that just based on the volume of conversations we have with customers around things they're trying to address in their environment in this category of networking and security, I think identity and access management is probably the first one. Like if you don't have that right,
Yeah.
there's all types of things that could break, especially if you're trying to introduce AI into your world, if you will. So
Yeah.
that's one of those foundational pillars that some of the other stuff would sit on top. I'd say like observability and monitoring is probably a close second, right? Because that's going to ultimately fit into some of these initial analytics, but also is going to give you the leg up in the future on where to focus. And if you have blind spots, in part of the environments, you don't have good coverage, especially when it comes to your observability platform, kind of fighting with one hand behind your back.
Yeah.
I think addressing the security controls is probably a close third. I mean, I would assume that a mature enterprise probably has quite a bit of sophistication there. So this is going to be a refinement to the security controls that they have in place. But AI is probably not going to break, right? If the current framework were to stay roughly as is, obviously there have to be some alterations, and then probably like the automation and orchestration is the thing that would fall forth on that in my mind, and I'm just basing that maybe anecdotally on the flavors of conversations I have with our customers.
Yeah, well, that's great. That's super. And those are all like just such hot buttons because we have a session that is going to be actually a little bit after your session. And Daniel, you guys are kicking off, the conference on day 2. A little bit later, like a couple of hours later, there is Andy Brown has a session. I know Svigal is on that session, and a few other kind of high power, kind of C-level, technical, folks like CTOs of large organizations. And that Andy's session is all about why do 96% of Gen AI projects fail in the large enterprise. So his panel is made up of folks who are in the 4%. And so, I've been privy a little bit to like what they're going to say, but one of the biggest issues, if not the biggest issue, is really what you just talked about, and that is that the infrastructure is not ready. So I think, what would be another real great use case for this model and this process, that you're going to be talking about with Daniel is, AI readiness, and how do you assure that your infrastructure is ready, so that you don't go into a cul-de-sac or you don't spend a bunch of money and kind of lose your, a little bit of your credibility with executive management, by having a project and falling into, or an AI project and falling into the other 96, percent. So maybe that's, I'm not sure if you're seeing that within DXC right now, like, how others are looking to do to use the tool as well. But that seems like all the items that you just checked off are the items that we've been hearing about and seeing about in kind of AI readiness for the infrastructure.
Yeah, we anticipated this to be a byproduct of the data coming out of the tool and the reporting. Maybe there would be a time where we could say, hey, here's like your AI readiness report, and it does the work for you, right? And certainly you might even be able to ask natural language questions to the model, and get like, hey, where should I focus or whatever specifically, because I'm thinking about doing this inference project, for this app or this business unit or something like that. Certainly the data will be there to be able to ask and answer those types of questions.
Awesome. Great. Well, Holland, this has been great. Just super great. Do you have anything else that you want to add before we adjourn?
Man, we covered a lot of ground. I guess I'm looking forward to seeing you and whoever's watching or listening to this maybe next week at the conference in New York, October 22nd, 23rd. Yeah, Nick, just thank you. It's always great to chat with you. You always get my wheels turning in my mind, so I appreciate that.
Well, awesome. Holland, it was my pleasure. It was nice to meet you as well. Yeah, I look forward to meeting you face to face in 3D, next week, in Manhattan. So thanks so much for the time, and also really congrats on the tool. I know it's like a work in progress, but hopefully the ONU community can also contribute to it as well. It's something that'll benefit, everybody. So Holland, again, thanks so much, and also thank you everyone for plugging in.
Thanks, Nick.